All right, folks, as we've obviously been discussing all morning, tragically, the nation is devastated with this last deadly shooting that we had out of Uvalde, Texas, 19 children and 2 adults dead. But as everyone across the country reacts, it's been reigniting the gun debate around the Second Amendment. Once again, here to discuss, host of the popular podcast Bearing Arms and the editor of BearingArms.com, Cam Edwards himself. Cam, listen to what Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, had to say about the NRA.
What is inappropriate is that the leadership of the National Rifle Association has proven time and time again that they are contributing to the problem of gun violence, not trying to solve it.
Cam, I know you were at the NRA convention either now or you were this week, and I just have the simple question. If the NRA is part of the problem, name me one of these mass shooters that was a member of the NRA.
Yeah, I can't do that. And you're right, Carl. I mean, look, this is the thing we've seen. From the moment that the White House responded to the shooting in Uvalde, they have placed the blame on gun makers. They have placed the blame on the NRA. They have placed the blame on gun owners. I've heard very little talk about the actual perpetrator of this attack being blamed for his own actions.
Even his own mother gave him a pass.
Exactly. And that's where I think we need to focus. On both sides, by the way. We need to blame the perpetrator for his actions. We also need to talk about the inaction of those first responders. Because, you know, I was listening to your last segment, and we can have a good guy with a gun in schools, but if that good guy with a gun doesn't go towards the danger, doesn't go towards the threat to try to save those lives, then it doesn't matter, right? So I think we have to get beyond talking about the tool, and we have to start talking about the person holding that gun, whether that they're holding that gun to protect kids or they're holding that gun to try to end innocent human lives.
And the fact that every single time this happens, they're like, oh yeah, that guy was really messed up. We should have seen this coming sooner, and they never do. And they never change anything. The other thing I want to talk about, and you do something fantastic on your podcast, every single day you come up with a report at the end of your podcast that talks about somebody in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing with a firearm generally to stop a crime. Is there any study out there that you can point to that proves the negative, that says the presence of guns, the mere possibility of presence or the physical presence of guns stops crime?
Well, what we do know is that anywhere from, on the low end, studies show at least 100,000 defensive gun uses every year. On the high end, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 million defensive gun uses every year. So let's, you know, pull it in the middle, right?
2.5.
A million times a year in this country, we've got people who are protecting themselves. But we also do, Carl, have studies that show that armed teachers and armed guards, school resource officers, actually do make a difference. James Eric Dietz, who is a professor at Purdue University's Homeland Security Institute, did an extensive study and found that the fastest way to stop an attack in school is to have a school resource officer who can rove and pursue that attacker while there are armed teachers sheltering in place behind locked doors with their kids, who can stop that threat if it breaches the door.
Right.
That's what we need to be talking about.
Well, Cam, I can also
talking about a multifaceted approach to protecting our kids, as opposed to thinking that it's just one simple thing that we can do, and all of a sudden the problem goes away.
Well, Cam, I can point to one study. It's a little while ago, but Admiral Yamamoto, after they bombed Pearl Harbor, was asked why he didn't invade America when the entire Pacific fleet had been basically wiped out. And he said, I would never invade a country with a gun behind every blade of grass. Talk about that.
Well, the idea that, again, if there are more armed citizens around to prevent these types of things, to respond in the immediate moment, that does tend to serve as a deterrent effect to some degree. We just saw the FBI release a report on active shooters earlier this week, and they showed that there were 4 incidents in the United States last year where armed citizens were able to take action. They were in a position to stop this attack. Now, when you think about the number of Americans who have concealed carry licenses or the number of Americans who live in constitutional carry states who carry, this is a pretty large number.
Yeah.
If we were to encourage, more individuals to get trained to know how to be responsible and competent with their firearms so that they can protect themselves and if need be protect others, I think we would be in a better place. But again, that's only one part of the solution. I'm not suggesting that that's the only thing that needs to be done.
Yeah, I would be less likely if I was a bad guy to want to target a place that says, this place is well armed. Cam Edwards, always a pleasure, sir.
Thanks, Carl.
All right.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.